For those of you who are brand new online, we are inside the Ananda Temple in Palo Alto, California, which is where I've been living for the last 36 years, not inside the temple, but in Palo Alto. Although sometimes I feel like we've been living inside the temple. We've never actually spent the night in here, but we've spent long nights in here. Let me phrase it differently. We have spent the night in here, but we've never actually rolled out our sleeping bags, although we have often thought how much fun it would be. So, and I'm not sure how much of the altar shows behind me, but behind me are the line of masters that Ananda is based upon and that I've devoted my life to serving. So we begin every event with a prayer to ask God and Gurus to bless us in everything we're doing. So please pray with me. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, beloved Master, Paramhansa Yogananda, saints of all religions, humbly we bow to all. Dear friend Swami Kriyananda, we are deeply grateful for your presence in our lives, for the guiding example, and for the profound teachings. Help us this day to feel the living presence of God and Gurus, that we may be enlightened, heart, mind, and soul, as the way to live in happiness and to share that joy with all. Om Shanti Shanti. Amen. Our topic today is a very interesting one, extremely important one, how to awaken your own spiritual power. I found it charming for those of you who have seen the visual that was put on. There's this shadow of this bodybuilder, how to awaken your own inner power. I'm not sure if it was meant tongue-in-cheek, but I was amused by it in any case. The subtitle is How to Protect Yourself from Negative Energy, which is actually a very interesting, it's an interesting juxtaposition to put those two things together. We tend to think of the negative energy as like, we tend to personalize that somewhat. Other people who are out to get us for good or ill. But also, in the times that we're living in, there is so much energy swirling around. I don't read much of the news, but I read a little, and I read just enough to be really heartsick a great deal of the time as to what is happening. Not everyone watching us online lives in the USA, but those of us who live in the USA, Americans have always been optimistic and positive and extremely proud of our government and all of that. And we're also going through big things here in this country. Everything that those of us have relied on for a long time, a lot of the shared assumptions seem to be cracking. We are by no means in the position that many countries are in the world, and many of you watching online may be in already, where it's more than just a little bit of news. It's a real chaos. But that chaos could easily spread. So a topic like today about how to really develop your inner strength and how to protect yourself from negative forces is extremely timely. In the 1980s, Swami Kriyananda, who's my spiritual teacher, again, I'm explaining, those of you in the room know, so you have to forgive me, I'm explaining to people online who might not. Swami Kriyananda was a direct disciple of Paramhansa Yogananda, who wrote Autobiography of a Yogi. Autobiography of a Yogi, which was published in 1946, was actually one of the key elements that really launched a global spiritual revolution. A great deal of the fruit of that effort is what we're seeing now with this tremendous rise in spirituality, and spirituality as somewhat distinct from religion. That's what Autobiography of a Yogi brought in, that spirituality and God and what we call religion is not really about the institution. It's entirely and only about the individual. Where is my heart? Where is my mind? What causes me fear? What gives me courage? How do I live in this world in such a way as to be victorious in the face of what comes to me instead of being defeated by it? Now, in 1946, that was the end of the Second World War. So it's not as if that book came out of peaceful times. And in fact, it's very interesting that the birth of the atomic age, the dropping of the 2 nuclear bombs, which was done by the USA, and the publication of Autobiography of a Yogi happened right together. So it's extraordinary how the shadow and the light are always interplaying. And we are in a time when the shadow and the light are having an interplay. I often use the word shadow. Sometimes I use the word dark, but shadow is a better word because the ultimate and only underlying reality is light. But it is possible for that light to get blocked, or it is possible for us to step out of that light. And then you're standing in shadow. But even the concept of shadow depends on the existence of light. And so words have power because of the images they create. So there is a tremendous shadow force on the planet right now. And a lot of that shadow force has public attention, has governmental attention. It has millions of dollars, bazillions of dollars, really. It has armies, it has nuclear weapons. And I'm not trying to start by being depressed, but I am starting by saying, this is really serious, guys. This is not a time to say, oh, next year, the year after, I'll begin to think about these things. And I was starting to say back in the 1980s, because Paramahansa Yogananda predicted, that he explained, we're moving from the age of matter into the age of energy. Kali Yuga is the age of matter, Dwapar Yuga is the age of energy. In the year 1900, the planet shifted from Kali Yuga to Dwapar Yuga. However, there is a tremendous force on the planet that is determined that the future will look like the past. And that means that races will stay separate, religions will stay separate. My way is the right way. Authoritarian power belongs to the people who can grab it. That fixed forms, my religion is different than yours. And happening at the same time and irresistible. Excuse me a moment. Happening at the same time and irresistible is globalization. One language, the Nobel Peace Prize, quite a few years ago, was won by a woman who campaigned against landmines. And she was one person with one computer on her kitchen table. And she changed the planet. And Tom Friedman calls this the superpowered individual. He said the history until that time had been the power of what he called nation states. And that was, everybody thought that nation states had the power. Then one superpowered individual took on the whole thing and changed it. And this is the past and this is the future, you see. But the superpowered individual was working for the light, was bringing in a higher understanding. And the nation states, so to speak, were just holding on to what has always been true. So there's a tremendous energy that the future should look like the past. And then the future itself, for lots of reasons that I would take too much time to go into, but the future has more power than the past. Everything has changed. All that separation and isolation, and you look different from me, then you must be different from me, that all depends on people being held within those boxes. But now, when the United States was at war with somebody, I think it might have been Yugoslavia, I don't remember. I was out of the country at the time, and one of my friends where I was staying said, "Oh, you Americans, you're always at war with someone." And I thought, oh my goodness, we are, aren't we? Now, I'm not disloyal to this country, and I have a tremendous amount of, America is a Dwapara Yuga country, but we're still just past puberty in terms of actually really being able to be what we are, and now we're having this, within our country, we're having this teenage rebellion. So Yogananda said that America is the wave of the future because it was the first country that said, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, means they can't be taken away, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We haven't lived up to that, but there it is. And this is Dwapara. This is why Yogananda came to the U.S. to start all this. Well, ending of all of this is, oh yes, when I was there, I read somewhere on the internet, that a young person in the country that was being bombed, and young people on this side, the country that was sending the pilots out, they're talking to each other. And because they're already friends, they're talking to each other, when the planes are coming overhead. Now, you can do that for a while, but you can't do that indefinitely, because those young people will grow up, and they will know that there's something really askew about this. In the meantime, and this is where we are, we're in the meantime of this. Now, also bear in mind, I'm talking on the cosmic scale right now, on the global scale, because this global energy is creating chaos in the atmosphere. And we're all subject to these universal thoughts and these forces of energy. And some people are facing it in their living room right now. Even without any of this, we still have the friction of the fact that we don't know how to love each other. And that even though we all want to love each other, we don't know how to love each other. And we get very confused as to what causes happiness and what causes suffering. And when you get caught in the shadow, you forget. And we make very bad choices. And we feel that we just try to get power over each other in one way or another. And it doesn't work. It never makes anybody happy. But that's the planet we live on. Because even at the best of times, this is not meant to be paradise. It's just such a bummer to have to face that. It really isn't. Our souls incarnate here because we have certain things we don't know about how God loves us and where our power really comes from. And so we imagine ourselves to be intensely vulnerable. And we dream that we are intensely vulnerable. But even if it's a dream, while you're in it, it seems extremely real. I mean, any of us who've had a nightmare, which probably all of us have had nightmares at one time, while you're in it, it's completely real. And when you wake up, it's not. But I had a recurring dream for years. Finally, it stopped. And in the dream, and the details of what was the catalyst were never in the dream, but I had done something that was showed extremely poor judgment, and as a consequence, my position in life had been ruined. You know, maybe I was a government official who took bribes and then was exposed. You know, maybe I was an immoral woman who somehow wrecked whatever relationships I had or family. Who knows what it was? I never knew in the dream. I just knew that I had just done something that was just going to ruin the rest of my incarnation. And also in the dream, it was like, how could I be so stupid as to have done that? And then I would just be collapsed in the dream, and then I would wake up. And it was always, I was so relieved, you know, that it was just, and my belief is it was past lives. Why? What makes a person very conscientious about such things now? Well, because we weren't conscientious in the past, that's all. And we got the experience. And so there's a lot of people around us right now who are learning lessons that they have to learn. And global times makes the pressure more intense, but it's actually just the nature. This is a school, and we're here to learn. So that's, and I never finished with Swami in the 1980s. In the 1980s, Swamiji felt this tremendous responsibility to wake people up to the fact that we really need to get ourselves focused, because Yogananda talked about difficult times, and Swamiji, the way Yogananda talked about it in 1952, as Swamiji said, he talked about it on Sunday, and you thought it was going to start on Monday. So the fact that much of the world is still functioning, although many places are not functioning 75 years later. But in the 1980s, Swamiji started a whole series of programs which he called Building Spiritual Power Against Troubled Times. And he would go out and say many of the things I just said, but without as much evidence as we presently have. And he would just say to people, don't wait. He said, don't wait. He said, build your spiritual muscle now so that you will be strongly informed and have begun to be that kind of a spiritual hero that even if the wind blows, your roots are deep enough in the unchanging power that you'll be. Safe is not the right word. Courageous and strong is the word that we want. Because what is safe? Safe is, oh goody, I don't have to grow. And that might not be the right thing, because we can't be protected against our own karma. We have to face it. So what we really want is we want to have the capacity to face it. Now, having started with all of that, here's how I have come to believe that we work with all of this. And bear in mind that we are now, and I'm speaking to my friends online, this is a 3-hour program, and what we're talking about is a complete reorientation of our understanding of life. So this is meant entirely to open a few windows. We all wish for the dramatic conversion, because that was so much easier. I walk in one person and I walk out another. But sometimes things that are too dramatic change back as quickly as they change in one direction. Because we have long-standing patterns within us, and the energy that we put into building those patterns, think of it like momentum. I think of it like a car that's going 100 miles an hour down the freeway. I had this experience, I wasn't going 100, but I was going 70, whatever the 70 miles per hour, just going down the freeway, and I missed my exit. And I missed my exit. Okay, I'll get off at the next one. Next exit was closed. The exit after that I got off on, and then I got off, and then there was a detour. This was also before GPS. So I get off and there's a detour. I go on the detour. I end up, I don't know where I am. I have to retrace my steps. It took me 45 minutes, almost an hour actually, to get back to where I'd missed the exit. This is because of momentum. As I saw it go by, I was going too fast to turn. And then the conflicting cross currents of other kind of karma just came in. So I never lost track of where I was trying to get. It's just the process of doing it turned out to be a lot more complicated than I thought it would. So we have to first awaken to the fact that I don't have to be a helpless pawn in the currents of fate, whether it's global or personal. Nobody has power over me unless in some way I surrender that power. Now, that doesn't mean people can't have power over your physical body or your finances. What we're really talking about, the kind of power that we're really talking about, is what comes inside, what is inside. And the most fascinating thing about us is that just as I was talking about, the Kali Yuga is, I didn't explain it, but Kali Yuga is the age of form and fixed definitions. That's why, the people who are still fighting for that want religions, ethnicities, countries. Everybody stays apart and stays in their place, just like that. Okay? But Dwapara Yuga is the age of energy. This is Einstein telling us that the whole thing is energy. And everything is just energy taking one form or another. And the thing about energy is it's nothing until it takes a form. Meaning, till it has a vibration and it expresses a certain way. But it's the same substance. This is what Einstein said. Everything that looks separate and different isn't. It just appears that way. It's the dream that makes it look like that. But the substance of the dream, just like when you dream when you're asleep, comes right out of my own consciousness. Nothing is imposed on me. It comes right out of my own consciousness. I go back into past life memories and previous experiences I don't remember, but still it's just all my consciousness, totally self-created. And so therefore, we can also perceive reality very differently. Reality in a certain way may still be the same, but we experience it differently. I just had some small children in the house. I live alone and I don't have children, but I had friends visiting with little children. I go like this because one of them was really, really small and had a personality and a little bit of a body like a soccer ball, meaning like the soccer ball was just always going somewhere with a great deal of intention like that. And let's see what the point of mentioning that was. Let me just think. Just the perception, I'm sorry, I've lost the reason I brought it up, except that he was so cute, I just had to reference it again. He knew how to climb upstairs, and while he was in the house, he learned how to climb downstairs. Big thing. He didn't get the word down, he kept using the word up, whichever direction he was going, but nonetheless, he learned how to bounce down on his bottom, like little kids can do. You're just watching him just become aware of who he is and what his power is. And one of the reasons that we have those observations, and this is why I brought it up, what is the limit? Just because our body gets to be a certain size and we get language and can function in this world, is that the end of it? Or are we always discovering new levels? And what I wanted to say about the energy, it's just energy. And the reason we consistently think the same things, act the same way, have the same fears, it's a question about fright. That little children are frightened of many things that are not at all scary, but they don't know. And so they feel helpless, and therefore, mommy, mommy, daddy, daddy, where are you? When the little soccer ball was a little too far away from his mother, even if he was bravely bumping down the stairs, you would hear him start saying, Mama, Mama, and Mama would have to say, I'm right here, because the fear would come into him. And then we get older, we can live away from our mothers, but we have countless other fears that we're dealing with. But it's all an energy pattern. It's just that we repeat the same things over and over, and a pattern gets set, and then we fall into it. But it's entirely mutable. Absolutely nothing about us is fixed. And so all we have to do is we created this pattern by repeating, building momentum in a certain way, and all we have to do is reverse the momentum. We have to put out enough energy, we have to put on the brakes, we have to figure out where we're going, we have to turn the car, sometimes we have a little karma to go through, but if we know where we're going and we persevere, in a relatively short time, you won't even recognize yourself. I mean, literally. Things will happen and you'll think, you just respond entirely differently, because we've trained ourselves to do that. That's why Swami wanted us to start in the 1980s, just getting going with this. Now, energy pattern is vibration of consciousness. Yogananda has this remarkable statement in Autobiography of a Yogi. If you haven't read that book, I highly recommend you read it. And there's countless phrases that all by themselves are sufficient to completely redirect your life. And one of them is this one: thoughts are not individually created, they are universal. And we merely tune into vibrations of consciousness that we think are the ones that we want. And then we become an instrument of that. That's why shadow people, they're not really shadow. They're made of divine light as much as anyone. It's just that they've gotten in the habit of tuning into the shadows, these great rivers of consciousness that flow. So what we're actually training ourselves to do is to just tune in to different levels of reality. We have this word, protecting yourself from negative energy. Negative energy is just energy, but it's oriented in a certain way that we might not feel is beneficial and uplifting for us. Other people take it in because they think it's going to make them happy, but because here's what this school is about, this entire planet school. What causes happiness? What causes suffering? And people have very different ideas about what causes happiness and what causes suffering. Even on tiny scale, people will... I was sitting in a restaurant. I've been a vegetarian since I was 18, which is now quite a long time. Let's just leave it at that. And I was in some very nice restaurant, and usually I'm not that squeamish. I've trained myself not to be squeamish, but the table next to me, they'd all ordered steaks and lots of red meat at that table, and they were also extremely enthusiastic about the red meat that they were getting. My first thought was, perhaps in the privacy of their own homes they would eat that, but aren't they embarrassed in this public place? It was just so naive. I mean, of course they're not embarrassed. They came here specifically to have it, and they think that having that wonderful steak or whatever it is going to make them very happy. I mean, to me, if you wanted to torture me, that would be the way to do it, would be to put me close to it. I couldn't, there's a product now called Beyond Meat, and when my friends first brought it into the house where I was staying, they were staying with me then, they brought it into the house and they gave me this patty, and they wanted me to taste it. I took a bite of it. I had to take it out of my mouth. It has beet juice in it, so it looks a little bloody. And they made it so that it has the texture of meat. And I couldn't swallow it. It was just too close for me. Now, I actually, since then, I've gotten over it. And these are very good products. But see how simple that is? But then let's go a lot farther. You belong to me. If you try to do something that I don't like, I'm going to make sure that you have to conform to what I want. I mean, we see this all the time, most horribly when families split up. When people who used to love each other, one or the other is really angry, starts fighting over the children, but they're doing it because on some level they think it's a good thing to do. Now, the reason I'm saying that is because it's just their thoughts. Maybe they have an expensive lawyer. There's all kinds of ways people act these things out. But it's just their energy. And whether or not we tune into and let that energy come into us, or whether we just have a vibration of our own that's so powerful and so contrary that we may know it's there. But I'm going like this, it taps on the edge of our aura, right? And the more our aura matches what they're trying to send to us, if there's well, this is how vibrations work. Think about when somebody's singing and you match their note. If you match their note, then all of a sudden your vibrations go like this. If you can hear it at all, if someone's singing one note and you're singing another note, your vibrations go like this, right? Okay, talking in a negative way, somebody sends negative energy to you. If you are afraid, especially if you are afraid, fear is the one that makes the really big opening. If you're afraid, it opens a hole in your aura, and that which you're afraid of can come in. If you respond in kind, oh, I'll show you, that's also a match. Because it's the same vibration they're putting out. This is why if your goal is peace, you're not going to get there with anger. Now, don't misunderstand me at all. It's a very important point here. Being a doormat is not the same as loving. Sometimes love is very, very stern. What you're doing is completely wrong, and there's not a chance in the world that I'm going to cooperate with you. I'm going to get my expensive lawyer and make it strong like this. You can stand up like a warrior, but it's what is the vibration within you. I'm doing this because I have a love for righteousness. And it's like, that's what we're talking about. We're standing in righteousness. Swamiji actually said that one of Yogananda's important teachings was that truth is joyful, he said, and not merely an angry response to unrighteousness. Isn't that interesting? Because we want to convert the negative energy, or let me phrase it differently, we want to counter the negative energy with the opposite of it. And the opposite of it has to be love, and it has to be joy. But you might not be able to love the shadow person because the shadow person may be behaving in a way that is not at all lovable. And it's extremely naive to say, oh, well, they're a good person. Not really. Somebody was talking to me about one of these horrible family disputes, and they tried to say, oh, well, they're a good person. I said, no, their actions are evil. They looked really startled. No, there's no reason in the world. Their behavior is totally selfish and hurtful to everyone involved. Don't kid yourself. But the love you see is for truth. I'm standing for the truth because I love the truth. And if you're blocking the light, then that's what you're doing. I'm going to shine the light on what's happening here. Now, having talked much longer than I expected, but I never know what I'm going to do. One of the many, many tools, and this is where I wanted to take this, one of the many tools that Swami Kriyananda gave us to change the vibration was music that he wrote. Yogananda and Swami Kriyananda both were artists. Yogananda wrote poetry, music, and books. Swami Kriyananda wrote a great deal of music, and with a lot of it with poetic lyrics. And all of it came, and this is why we're going to go there, and my friend is all set up to do music here with us. Let me try to get this exactly. Yogananda Master created a great number of chants, which are repetitive songs where everybody knows what chanting and kirtan is these days. I don't have to explain it. But you concentrate and you sing and you move the energy and you shift into another energy. He said, on the spiritual path, He said, chanting is half the battle, is how the phrase he used, which is very interesting. And I've thought about that a lot, because we are nothing but vibration, and we are sound. We are made of sound. Sound has a completely different effect on us than mere visual images, because it's the way we're made. Fascinating studies with people who've had Alzheimer's, who may have not spoken or related to this world even in years, and you come in and you play the music that they knew, and all of a sudden they're singing. Their whole vibration is different because it's right there deep in them. And music has the way they put it is, music not only reflects consciousness, music creates consciousness. Consciousness is another word for vibration. So everything that we bring into us, especially music, has a tremendous, it shifts the energy pattern. And Swamiji described the music that he wrote, which is, he said, it's not his music. He said it just came to him. It was given to him. He described it as a new ray of consciousness that has come into the world as music. Isn't that an interesting way to say it? It's a new ray of consciousness that has come into the world as music. And so it's not like this is the best. Somebody asked Swamiji once, what is your favorite music? And he said, mine. And then he sort of heard what that sounded like, and so he amended it first, and he said, it's not really mine, it was given to me. But he said, it was given to me because it matches my soul vibration. He said, now if you'd asked me what the best music was, he said, I would have answered it differently. But when you ask what my favorite is, it's my favorite because it matches my vibration. So the songs, and one of the reasons that I learned this, my friend Anaya is here to sing with us. When I was having a dispute with people who were close to me, who were friends, and we were in a period of disagreement, which we've mostly resolved. And so I, being a very verbally oriented person, but perhaps some of you can relate to this, I was having lots of conversations with these people, even though they weren't in the room, even though they weren't in the same city. I was still having conversations with them. And my mind would just keep going back into those conversations. And I couldn't break the loop. Okay, how do you make a link? Somebody gets a hold of you, and then you just keep talking to them. And so they've accomplished exactly what they're trying to accomplish, which is now they own your awareness. And I couldn't break that link, and I knew it was extremely detrimental. And I wasn't, let's just say, I wasn't behaving according to my own ideals. These conversations were not kind. So Anaya suggested I just sing one of Swami's songs, which we'll eventually sing, but not first. The song is Little Kathy, and it's a very silly is not the right word. It's just not my favorite song. Little girl goes out and she dances in the garden. She finds a robin, they dance together. You know, it's like, I tended to go more for the, the big anguishing, here I am, Lord sort of songs. But she said, sing it. And I ride my bike, and it was warm weather, and I was on my bike, and I heard my mind doing these things. And all of a sudden I remembered, and I don't particularly sing well, but I was a moving target, so I just started singing Little Kathy. As soon as I put that vibration into my consciousness, it simply drove the other one away. They could not exist in the same consciousness at the same time. Didn't touch the situation, but it totally changed my inner weather, so to speak. Like that. So I want us to have some fun with Swamiji's music, but I'm not offering this casually. I'm offering this so that we can have an experience of how the right kind of input completely changes what's going on inside, okay? So, somewhat later than I intended, I would like to have Anaya come up. And those of you who are in the room, we have these songbooks because we also want you to sing. And I see that I have some singers in this room. And also those of you who are online, we're going to make the words available to you. You don't have to sing well, but at least sing quietly. I mean, at least sing quietly. Belt it out if you want to. But at least have the words and the melody going through you, if you can. Or else, if you're not familiar with these, those who are not in the room, you can listen to Anaya sing them as they're meant to be sung, and you can feel it. We're going to sing 3 songs. Yes, we're going to start with Come Gather Round, which is, I don't know what page it's on, but it's alphabetical in the book, so it shouldn't be hard to find. 46, she's going to help you. Okay? So, Lakshmi, if you do me a favor and mute my microphone, that will allow me to sing, which I would like to do. Thank you.
Great. And so for those of you who have one of these, there's some on the chairs. For those of you online, if you happen to have this, it's page 46. And it's also easy to find this. It's called an Ananda Songbook. You just type it into online anywhere and find it. You can order a digital copy or a physical copy. And as a tribute to this book, I learned how to play guitar from reading the easy chords in here. So if you ever want to learn how to play guitar, I'm a recent learner because of it, so I'm really happy about that. So come gather round and let's sing together. Come gather round, let joy sing out today. Dawn now is breaking, and the mountains say, it's only light can't make the darkness run. Lift up your head, greet the rising sun. Greet the rising sun. Some people think to harvest happiness by weeding troubles, easing every stress. The trouble is that troubles never end. Get rid of one and you face its friend. And you face its friend. It's in your heart, the songs of joy resound. You'll hear but echoes in the world around. Wind on a hill sounds lonely if you're sad, free if you're free, cheerful if you're glad. Cheerful if you're glad. Friends, come with me. We'll chant of battles won, shots not of anchor. Joy will be our gun. Before the light, the veils of sorrow end in inner freedom. All delusions end. All delusions end. The next one is called Life is Beautiful, page 153. And this one is a children's song. It's super easy to sing, so don't be shy. Life is beautiful, life is gay, when I give myself away, when I live to please thee, Lord, dancing in thy ray. Let me see thee everywhere, hear thy melodies in the air. Let me feel thy strength in me, give me joy to share. Again, Life is beautiful, life is gay, when I give myself away, when I live to please thee, Lord, dancing in thy ray. Let me see thee everywhere, hear thy melodies in the air. Let me feel thy strength in me, give me joy to share. Once more, life is beautiful, life is gay, when I give myself away, when I live to please thee, Lord, dancing in thy ray. Let me see thee everywhere, hear thy melodies in the air. Let me feel thy strength in me, give me joy to share. Let me see thee everywhere, hear thy melodies in the air. Let me feel thy strength in me, give me joy to share. Give me joy to share. Isn't that sweet? That's one you can sing walking around the block. Beautiful. The last one we'll do is called The Secret of Laughter. And if it's not easy to pick up on the verses, the refrain is super easy. And that one, whoever finds Secret of Laughter, call out the page. 207. The secret of laughter lies in the laughing, not in the search for joy. It's a swallow winging on the wind, it's innocence in a boy. Here's the refrain. Lura-luru-lero, lura-luru-lie. Joy will come to anyone whose heart has learned to fly. Again. Lura-luru-lero, lura-luru-lie. Will come to anyone whose heart has learned to fly. Joy in the singing, not in the song sung. Welcome but never crave. If you think that laughter lies in things, to things you'll be but a slave. Lura-luru-lero, lura-luru-lie. Joy will come to anyone whose heart has learned to fly. Lura-luru-lero, lura-luru-lie. Joy will come to anyone whose heart has learned to fly. Joy in the giving, not in the gaining. Grasp and you'll never sing. You could win the world and still be poor. Win peace and live like a king. Lura-luru-lero, lura-luru-lie. Joy will come to anyone whose heart has learned to fly. Lura-luru-lero, lura-luru-lie. Joy will come to anyone whose heart has learned to fly. Sing when the sun shines, sing when the rain falls, sing when your road seems strange. In a tempest seize the lightning flash and ride the winds of change. Lura-luru-lero, lura-luru-lie. Joy will come to anyone whose heart has learned to fly. Lura-luru-lero, lura-luru-lie. Joy will come to anyone whose heart has learned to fly. Well done.
A very important word when we're talking about being strong inside, and also when we're talking about dealing with energies that are coming at us that are not what we would want or what we would think other people ought to be doing. And it's a word that Swami Kriyananda used really often, and the word is appropriate. Sometimes we try to make our behavior defined from the outside. That's what I was saying about a friend of mine was caught in a very difficult situation that had a very disruptive effect on her life because of the actions of other people. And the actions of other people were less than ideal. There was, to put it mildly, it was just one of those things. And she was trying very hard to get over her sense of many upsets. And so this was during the time that Swamiji was still with us, Swami Kriyananda. He passed away in 2013, so this was before that. And she was struggling, and so she was trying to find a way, and she was speaking to him, and she said, well, everybody just behaved just right, the people who had done things that were upsetting to her. Everybody did. Their behavior was fine. This is what people say. Everything is perfect. Everybody's behavior is just what it had to be. And she said it like that. And Swami said, no, it wasn't. He said, they behaved very badly. He said, do not comfort yourself by telling yourself something that isn't true. And this is going back to what I was saying before, that what we have to be focused on is not what other people are doing per se, except for us to be able to relate that to what is the higher principle that is involved here. Now, we can't start this the day that our world begins to fall apart. And this is why Swamiji was wanting us to start thinking about this. We have to start, even now, in an everyday way, in every situation we're in, we have to ask ourselves, what is the appropriate response? Now, it's also important to understand that even though I may not be more important, my needs may not be more important than the people around me, my needs are not less important than the people around me. You understand? Sometimes people think that to be generous means that I have to completely suppress everything that I want and feel. But there's no reason why you should be nothing either. To be impersonal about circumstance is also to be impersonal about myself, which is I am one of the players here. And how we decide what is appropriate is we use a phrase like the greatest good for the greatest number, but within what is possible. And I'll give you another context. In the Ananda setting, where people tend to be generous, or at least try to be, where we have this in our mind that we're trying to overcome our egos and not trying to assert our own desires, sometimes people twist that and start behaving in a way, even within our ashram, that is not appropriate. And this was a situation where there was a group of people that had been working together for some time, and there was one person in the group who thought always they had to be the one to sacrifice. So if extra work needed to be done, if extra shifts needed to be taken, they were always the one who would say, well, I'll do it, and they would insist that they'll do it. The problem was, it was not appropriate for them to offer because they really did not have the capacity to follow through on all those promises. So often they would take possession of a responsibility, but when it came down to it, they wouldn't be able to fulfill it. But because of their constant insistence that I'll be the one to sacrifice, the whole group was just hung on this because they thought that was the right attitude. I sacrifice myself, but it wasn't appropriate because it wasn't related to the truth. And the truth was that their capacity was much smaller than they wanted it to be, but we weren't being appropriate because we weren't following the truth. Can you follow all that? So what we need to be doing first is we need to understand what reality is, because reality always wins. We can affirm all we want, we can blind ourselves, we can be in denial, but reality always wins. You know, if this person is continually selfish and has no interest in self-development and isn't interested in the principles I'm talking about, No matter how much I wish that they would, they won't. And if someone, by their negativity, has convinced you that you are wrong, that, everything you think and feel is wrong, because I've done a lot of counseling, I see this really often. Somebody will just tell me a whole story about their behavior, and I'll say, where did you get that story? That has nothing to do with what's really happening. It's just some domineering person has persuaded you to, and it's not appropriate for them to have done that to you, and it's not appropriate for you to cooperate with it. We have to look toward the truth. We're not looking against this person, we're just looking at what's true in this. And now, that kind of self-honesty is not so easy to come by. And these are the different elements of the project. We can, there are simple things that we can say about how to protect yourself from negative energy. Literally, there's a very powerful mantra, which is, I'm offering this because it's real, Om Tat Sat. And you can just literally make an aura around yourself and say, Om Tat Sat, Om Tat Sat, Om Tat Sat. And you just make an aura around yourself. If you have to go into a courtroom or a contentious meeting and you know that you're going to be vulnerable, you want to build your aura like that. Yogananda said also you can make a cross of blue light between yourself and where there's negative energy. Don't you love this? You just make a cross of blue light like that. And then you see it, that I'm protected by this cross of blue light no matter where I have to go. These are very, very real. But what we really have to do, much more deeply, is we have to ask ourselves, why am I vulnerable? Why am I vulnerable? What I was saying about reality, the question is, why is this happening to me? And these questions all get much bigger because we have to go into karma, we have to go into reincarnation, we have to go, what is the purpose of life? Is the purpose of life to be comfortable? Our incredible bias on planet Earth right now, and the ego's incredible bias, is that good equals easy and pleasurable. Look at this planet. Everything is about how we can make it easy and how we can make it pleasurable. And because all walls are down these days, anything that we think gives us pleasure, if we like it at all, we want more and more and more of it. There's no, which is good. Someone who's 50 years younger than me just was commenting about some social norm in the world that they lived in. And I said, because I could, you have actually no idea how morally depraved you're living now. And then, because I felt a little badly about having said that, I said, but here's the good news. You've grown up not from their family, but in the society they lived in. I said, there are no fixed values in this society right now, especially where pleasure is concerned. There are no fixed values. So whatever values you come to, you will have come to them from your own experience. You will not be mindlessly and fearfully following somebody else's dogma. You will have tried it and found out what worked, what brings happiness, what brings suffering. So all of us are on this journey because the answer, the final answer to what causes suffering and what brings happiness is our separation from the realization that we are one with the infinite spirit. That's what makes us suffer. And what brings happiness is when we finally realize that's who and what we are. Now it's a very big end of the story, and most of us are not there. So we have all these experiences where we believe that all these conditions are required for our happiness. My children have to be like this, my spouse has to be like that, my home has to be like this, my money has to be like that, my country, my body. And it sounds extreme to say that none of these things are essential to our happiness. But this is the truth of it in the end. And so we are on this long journey where we get to experiment. Does this work? Does this work? Does this work? Does this work? And that's what karma is. Karma is what we don't yet know about what causes suffering and what brings happiness. Now, think about this for a minute. At least I'll speak for myself, and I think many of you can agree. Sometimes the very worst experiences that I've been through, in the end, have changed me in such a way that it has greatly reduced my vulnerability to suffering and greatly reduced my happiness. Not necessarily because the result was pleasurable and easy, but because the result was an awareness inside myself that I can determine for myself both my destiny, but not externally, but what my inner consciousness is like. There was a woman who came when I was working at Ananda's retreat up in Grass Valley, California. And this was many years ago, like in the early 80s. And she came all the way to that isolated retreat from Sweden, which in the 80s was a little more unusual than it is now. Now people just hop around the planet all the time. She came all the way from Sweden to come to our little meditation retreat, and she was in my class. She told this whole story about how she had a sister who was very close to her in age. They adored each other. They grew up together. They planned, they hoped to marry brothers or at least best friends. They would live next door to each other. They would raise their children together. Just beautiful, happy. In the mid-20s, which was what this woman was now, her sister got cancer and died. Just a whole lifetime was completely evaporated, plus her best friend, companion, gone, just like that. She says, because I had never suffered like that before, she said, I prayed. She said, I wasn't even a religious person, but I did not know where else to turn. So she prayed to God, whoever you are, she said, with an intensity and a power that she had never even considered. And as a consequence, because her mind was so focused, trying so hard to go outside the world she was living in, she connected to a higher realm of awareness that she'd never even looked toward before. And a power came into her that just changed her perspective. Yes, your sister is gone from your visible eyes, but everything is happening to help everyone here. And as a consequence of that, she started looking into spiritual life. She started looking into meditation. She found Autobiography of a Yogi. She comes all the way from Sweden to this little retreat in California. And she tells me this story, and after she tells me, I intuitively took a big risk. And I said, so, would you say that your sister's death was a tragedy or not? And her first response was, how could it be anything but? But her entire life had been refocused on a much more powerful and uplifting direction. And then she just said, I don't know. And you see, that's what we're working with here. That was a very dramatic example, but every difficult time that I've been through, and I finally get through it, which sometimes takes a decade, it's not like these things are easy. I always found, all that I've gained from the effort to fight my way through, and it's not negative, well, it is negative energy. It's negative in the sense that it takes away our happiness. You see, that's how you have to think about negativity. Negativity just takes away your happiness. It's not just that somebody's mean. It's anything that can take away your happiness, that can persuade you that now you have to suffer. And maybe I have always had a buoyant nature. Maybe I was happy, now I can't be, because something has come in. Now that, again, don't misunderstand me. We're not talking about pleasure and ease. We're not talking about superficial laughing all the time. We're talking on the deepest level. Do we understand that there is a divine upward reality to everything that we experience. And if we don't see it in the moment, it's because the story isn't over. The way I put it to myself, you know, all the fairy tales. I had this little girl in the house in the last 2 days, and well, actually last Sunday at our service here. All of you know we have a little 5-year-old girl in the sangha, and she's of all the little girls around, she's the bottom of the food chain. So all the beautiful clothes get passed down to her, and because if she has a temperament, she wears them all the time. So she came in to our Sunday service to get her blessing, which is part of it, and she was totally dressed like a princess, and the dress was like 6 inches longer, so it trailed along, and later she actually had a crown on too, with little puff sleeves, you know, just the whole thing. She was just completely like, there she was. I said to her afterwards, you know, comparing my liturgical garb and hers, I said, yours is much better. You know, maybe they can get me a little pink thing with puffy sleeves. But she, you know, she's a princess. She just lives in that world. And all of us, male or female, you know, we're sort of raised in a world of fairy tales to too large an extent. And they lived happily ever after. They lived happily. Art determines culture. And it's an extremely interesting fact that, you know, right now, modern culture, it's all about romantic personal love. I mean, it's also incredibly corrupt, but we've just had this, that somehow, you know, we have these 90-minute movies where everybody falls in love and then they live happily ever after. It's all just completely naive. It's not, now they're making it realistic by making it horrible, which is also just as false. So culture is becoming horrible. But it's very rarely actually what it is, but the happily ever after. But I've come to understand it from a different angle, which is if it's not the happy ending, it's not the ending. Because when it finally resolves into the realization that, wow, that was great, I learned so much that I couldn't have learned in another way. And that doesn't mean that it was easy and pleasurable, but it means that what I am now and what I've gained, I could never have gained in any other way. And that's the happy ending, you see. The happy ending is inner strength, is our inner power. And so we have to understand, even as these difficult things are happening, that there's another purpose. Now, you can't persuade yourself of that when the big stories come. You have to practice it all the time. And you have to watch your life, and you have to watch people around you, and you have to be honest about it. It was very interesting to me for a period of 20 years, from 1986 until 2006. I was part of a leadership group, and we took Americans to India on a pilgrimage tour based on Yogananda's autobiography. So I became extremely knowledgeable about this very specific thing. And almost always it was 30 Americans, and almost always they'd never been to India, and almost always they'd never been out of Western culture. And especially at the beginning, India is very different now. By 2006, it was very different. A lot of poverty, a lot of things you would see on the streets that you never saw if you'd never left the USA. People with maimed diseases, mothers with babes in arm. It was very intense. It was so interesting to me that the response of our pilgrim group, of our tours that we were bringing in there, the response to what they would see varied enormously. And it wasn't dependent on how shocking what they were seeing was. Because I think about these things, I began to try to understand, why are people reacting so differently? Some were completely at ease. I remember one lovely lady, you know, she just played with all the beggar children, and she was just so comfortable in an atmosphere that was so foreign to the one she was normally in. She was never shocked. She was always kind, just very much at ease. If I began to understand, if a person had come to understand that even apparent suffering has a purpose, and if we go through it courageously, we will always gain and learn something. In other words, if they were not rebelling against the necessity of hard times as a teacher, then they were able to just see souls going through situations that were not easy and pleasurable, but there was an underlying understanding of the divine journey. And those who were still rebellious against, and secondly, frightened that something would happen to them that would not be easy and pleasurable, then when they saw people going through what appeared to them to be hard times, they would just panic, and just have this hysterical desire to obliterate it, just to get rid of it, not even only about compassion, but also because of what it meant about our own lives. So we cannot protect ourselves from negative, which is to say, energy that persuades us that there's a reason for us to be unhappy, without really deeply examining, where do I think happiness comes from? Why am I here? What do I really want? Do I want just to get through? Or do I really want to grow? And so that's the real question. Do I really want to grow? And then the other question is there such a thing as a higher power, a guiding force that is taking me through this world? Or is this just completely random? And I can make very persuasive arguments about what I feel, but none of this has anything to do with what somebody tells you, or some institution tries to put into your mind, or what the church dogmas say, or anything like that. It has to be our own experience. And this is why, Swami, building spiritual power, unleashing your inner power, these are not quick solutions, because consciousness is inescapable. This is why people drink and take drugs. I don't drink, I don't take drugs. I used to have to drive home from our Grass Valley retreat late on Saturday. At certain times, we'd had these events up there, and there would be a late night event on Saturday night, and then I would have to be here on Sunday morning to give our satsang here. So I would often leave that place at like 10 or even 11 at night, and then drive back by myself. It was about at night it was like 3 hours and 10 minutes. Normally it's like 4. But I was driving, there was nobody on the highway, and the road was a little rough. And I kept changing lanes because the road was so rough. And then all of a sudden there was a policeman behind me. And he pulls me over, and he starts talking to me about who's the president of the United States, what year is this? I mean, just really strange questions. And I'm thinking like, why is he asking me these questions? I finally looked at him. He was just a young policeman. I said, oh, you think I'm drunk? And I looked at him and I said, let me think. I had a beer in 1966. I said, I think that was the last time. And then he looked a little startled. I said, you weren't born in 1966, were you? I said, I bet your mother wasn't even born. And so I persuaded him that I wasn't drunk, that I was looking for a smoother road. But having said all of that, the reason people do things like that is because it's unbearable to live in our own consciousness. And we just want to get away. So we watch Netflix for hours, we sleep, we take substances that just dull our awareness ever so slightly. But our true happiness does not lie in dulling our awareness. It's expanding it that we see it in proportion. And so I have to just give this illustration, which you've heard before, but this is the way it works. Imagine that your whole palm is completely black, because this is something truly horrible that has happened to you. Because really, really hard things happen, okay? And then you take the palm of your hand and you lay it over both your eyes. And you can open your eyes perfectly wide, but all you're going to see is black. And you can look in up, down, in all directions. Everything looks black. Because it is. Because somebody has died, somebody has betrayed you, somebody you love is suffering, and there's nothing you can do about their suffering. I don't have to make the story. Maybe war has broken out in your country, famine, all these things. So there it is, it's black. And this is what Swami said to that woman, it's black. You can't make yourself feel good by saying, oh, it's white, it's white. No, it's black. So the answer is not that you change what it is. The answer is that you get a perspective. So you take your palm off of your eyes, you put it out in front of you. It's the same size palm, it's just as black. But as soon as it's here, it's part of your reality, but it's not all of your reality. And see, that's the difference between expanding your awareness and killing it. So this is what we're having to do. We need to expand our awareness. And then life is still just the same. There may be war and famine in your country, and the people who have died are not coming back. And when you can say that, but then still know, but everybody is learning what they have to learn, and if it's not the happy ending, it's not the ending yet. This is what the children call a chapter book, which is a whole chapter ends and you turn the page, but the story's not over. Now, how do you get that kind of faith? You practice when it's easier. You have to be practicing all the time. There's a progression. So much of the difficulty in knowing how to respond to life is to be able to tell what is forward for me. The thing about the spiritual path, because we meet saints and masters or people, older brothers and sisters on the spiritual path, you see that it's a progression, that this is how I feel now, this is how I feel tomorrow. I've been following this path with great dedication for more than 50 years. And yesterday and the day before, really big new understandings come. So I'm very sincere and I'm very enthusiastic, but I have by no means reached the end of the story. I'm just walking along with you, telling you what the view looks like from where I am or what it looked like yesterday. So maybe if you were yesterday, you can move forward to here. But it depending on where you are in that process, depends on what's appropriate. I was saying, like, if you can, about the person who was always promising more than they could deliver, if they'd had the power to follow through and always be the one to come forward, that would have been quite probably their growing edge. That would be the right thing to do, to just put aside self-concern and work for others. But it wasn't appropriate for them to make those promises because it was an affirmation bigger than the person could do. So for them, progress would have been to say, gosh, I'd love to help you out, but I'm not that good. And so for them to admit their limitations would actually be the appropriate response instead of pretending those limitations weren't there because I want to look good. When I had very early with Swamiji, the very first few years that I was there, he gave me a responsibility that it wasn't unreasonable to think that I could have done it successfully, but I didn't succeed in doing it successfully. I didn't know how to do it, and my difficulty at that stage of my life, and my only excuse was that I was 25, and I had very little experience. I thought that competent people already knew how to do things, and I suffered from the fact that I was competent as a school student, but I wasn't competent in any other way. But if you grow up in a certain environment and you're good at school, everybody thinks you're competent, even if you're not, which was pretty much me. So he kept trying to train me to be able to do the job. He kept giving me suggestions. If I had understood, which I understood later, that competent people don't pretend to be competent, they try to learn from everybody, and that's how they become competent. This was a simple thing I didn't understand. And then I was caught in this loop with Swamiji where I wanted to look like a good devotee. So I wanted to say yes to whatever he suggested. So I had to say yes without having any idea how to do it and without having the humility and the receptivity to learn. It was a horrible cycle. Went on for about 2 years, in which I was just running this enterprise into the ground, not being able to do anything. And I was getting more and more resentful a little bit, just felt overwhelmed. And after 2 years, finally Swamiji said to me, everything was fracturing, it wasn't working well. And he said, I know you were trying to look good, he said, but you never fooled me. Which fortunately, the way I broke on it was, well, that was a colossal waste of time then, wasn't it? And just even that phrase, you never fooled me, actually made me realize that when people are pretending, you're rarely fooled. You can feel, but if they present to you a certain demeanor and they refuse to back down from it, there's very little that you can do if you're sensitive and concerned about their overall well-being. If you just have authority and want to exercise it, you can always do that, but I'm not talking about that. But the point was then, after that, I had to be very sincere with Swamiji. So I often started disagreeing with him, even standing up strongly and arguing. And everyone around me was a little horrified. But Swami wasn't. He was quite pleased because even though I wasn't being wise, at least I was being sincere. I was really expressing who I really was, and then it gave him something to work with. If it was only presenting a facade, there was nothing for him to work with. So for me to be less obedient at that point was really actually a step forward for me. Because we all have to ground our personalities, our behavior, our response to life. We have to ground it in what is actually true. So there's a progression of awakening that is actually, surprisingly perhaps, contained in the classical definition of the Indian caste system. The caste system from ancient times in India, not at all what exists now. Now it's just people having power over other people and all of the Kali Yuga rigidity that is the past. So that's not what we're talking about. But in ancient times, in a higher age, this idea was for us to be able to understand how we evolve, how human consciousness evolves. And there's many aspects to it, but I'm just going to pull out one or two here. And this also gives us a picture of just sort of how awakening happens. And it's a very interesting template to apply to both yourself and to people around you. And on my YouTube channel, there's whole classes on just this subject, but this is going to be truncated. So the 4 basic castes are Shudra, Vaishya, Kshatriya, and Brahmin. So for our purposes, the Shudra, the laborer, the peasant, the attitude of that person is that they can only think through their physical body. They don't have much mental creative process. And you see people, this is very politically incorrect, but you look around and you see people, that's just who they are. They're strong physically. They don't have a lot of creative mental energy. And when you're on that level, and all of us bear in mind, we don't fit neatly into any category. We have it on different days and in different situations. We have different aspects of these. So we're all of these castes at the same time. So I'm just physical. I don't have any brain power. I have no creativity. I can't think of what to do. How I am activated to move is if there's a threat of punishment. Otherwise, I'll just sit there, because how I get rid of suffering and find happiness is to put out as little energy as possible and to dull my awareness. This is us when a pint of ice cream and what they now call binge watching of various whatever we're watching, just like I'm going to put out as little energy as possible. I don't have the creativity to do anything more, and I'm just going to dull my awareness, and then I'll feel better. You drink, you take drugs, you watch television, you overeat, you sleep too much. What do those all have in common? It just cuts off your awareness, right? So that's the lowest choice. No creativity, just that. The second, the Vaishya begins to realize that if I am a little more creative, I can really influence my situation. I don't just have to be the laborer who works for the boss, who hits me with a stick when I don't do it. I can become the boss. What do you know? And you become the boss by putting out more energy, but also activating your mind. You're not just moving things around anymore. Shudras are totally uncreative. And sometimes you don't, sometimes you're places where, it's just like, why did you do it that way? You say, well, I don't know, that's the way it was always done. That's the way they told me to do it. But couldn't you see, that it wasn't going to work? No, it's just the way they told me to do it. No creativity. The creative mind says, oh, there's a better way to do this. Let's change the system. And then they change the system, and then they get a little more influence, and then they get a little more money. And then they start moving around the world using the creative mind. This is what the merchant caste represents. I'm the entrepreneur. I can make something happen. And it's not about being educated or uneducated, because we have lots of Shudras in positions of high influence, and we have lots of Vaishyas in positions of high influence. And the Vaishya also is willing to put out energy as long as there's something in it for me. And that's where it's the idea of the merchant. I'll give you a good product, you give me a good price. But you don't give me a good price, you don't get my product. It's always a trade. And so that's how we move through life. And it's a step up from just sitting there like a lump and doing nothing. It's a step up that I'm going to influence my destiny by my own energy. I'm willing to put out more energy. Now, the way that the Vaishya avoids suffering and finds happiness is they make the world the way they want it to be. So you see a lot of Vaishya in ourselves, and especially in the world around us, because most politicians, if they're not Shudras, they're Vaishyas. They're making the world the way it's supposed to be, and that's how things are done. Unfortunately, many of them are Vaishyas. I'm doing this because of what I get. As we move up to Kshatriya, we get better. But also within ourselves, and this is where it's very important, you see. A great deal of our vulnerability to the negative energy, whether it's cosmic or personal, coming at us, is because our happiness depends on making the world, my being able to make the world what I want it to be. And this is where a lot of political activism comes from, even if it oscillates between Vaishya and Kshatriya. But a lot of political activism is, that has to be different for me to feel good. And it can be noble. It can be coming from compassion. It can be coming from kindness and concern. The problem is, it has a very narrow capacity to succeed, because the human ego, our little minds, does not control this planet. And even if I think this is the best way for it to be, I'm just seeing it from my level of convenience right now. I'm not seeing it from the cosmic destiny of all the people around me. And everybody always protests to me, well, that doesn't just mean you let people to suffer. I'm talking in how we think about these things. That is there a higher power? Is there a divine in charge? Is the soul on a long journey? Or is everything just what I can see and how I evaluate it? Is my egoic idea of right and wrong the end point? And this goes back, see, everything is very interrelated. It goes back to, is suffering ever going to help us? And if you look in the little picture and you see some person being miserably mistreated, you'll think, this is horrible. This can't be true. But what happens is we live enough incarnations, and you have to have lots of incarnations to make this work, that we begin to realize, I'm never going to be able to control the world. I can get as much money as I want, and some drunk driver is going to still kill my son. I mean, it happens all the time. Or a revolution comes. A friend of mine from Nicaragua, whenever that revolution happened, and I'm talking now decades ago, Her family was so wealthy and so prominent that when the revolution happened, whoever was in charge of it moved into their house. And they were thrown out of the country, as it turned out. It's just, but it's like their family was about as established as it could be, and then they were gone like that. So that what happens is the soul begins to figure out, the jiva, the individual spirit, begins to figure out the problem with this idea is that it's not working. And this is the big question that all of us have to face. One of my friends put it to me so simply when I explained this big issue I was facing. She just very sweetly said, "And how is that working for you?" It was a perfect question, because the answer was not very well. And then the obvious question is, then why do you just keep doing it? So over incarnations, we put out a lot of energy, if we're good Vaishyas, to have more and more control over the world around us. But then we find again and again that there's a power greater than my own preferences and my own cleverness. And then I have to start asking myself much more deeply, what is going on here? And this is when we move from Vaishya. And again, remember, depending on the day of the week and the situation, we can be anywhere here. We move from Vaishya into Kshatriya. And Kshatriya, again, the soldier, what is the characteristic of the soldier? The soldier has tremendous self-mastery. The soldier puts himself, ideally, as the archetype, he puts himself in places that no one would want to go. He goes into them with complete force and commitment, may suffer terribly, even die from doing it, but steps forward to do it because he has mastery over himself and he's living for the sake of his ideal. And so what finally happens is that we realize, I can't control the world. What can I control? Where does, my idea that I would have happiness by making my external world be exactly as I want it to be. And the way we express this is like we're not even thinking about it. Oh, I don't know why they don't, why do they always do it that way? Or it's like, he said that, and I don't know why he said that. He always talks like that. Why would he be talking like that? We don't even think about it. Or we say, for the 100th time, to the people who are in our life, why did you leave the dishes in the sink one more time? If I'm only the one here who ever thinks about it, we don't think of it as anything except that's just our habit. But what we're trying to say is, my happiness depends on how you behave. Now, it may be appropriate still to say, could you help with the laundry? But it depends on the motivation. Are we moving into Kshatriya and say, the truth of the matter is that it would be appropriate for you to do more than you're doing. And even if you say it in the same words, and this is especially when you're raising children, children can always tell who's actually being served. And when you talk to your children and you pretend it's about them, they know it's not about them, they know it's about you. And even if it's a perfectly righteous request, it's not about them, it's about you. And sometimes your spouse or your parents, they know it's not about them, it's about you. It's the Vaishya desire to control the world. And the question you have to ask yourself over and over again is, how is that working for you? And is this even a valid way to go at life? So this negative energy is coming at us, let's say from someone or from some circumstances. So I can't control the world around me, but what could I control? Oh, I could control my reaction. And that's when we become a kshatriya, we become a soldier. We enter the real battlefield. Because the real battlefield is not to make everyone and everything around us conform. The real battlefield is, who am I? What am I thinking? Why am I doing this? And the reason most people prefer to be Shudras or Vaishyas is that once you transfer over and realize that I will never get my happiness from making the world as I want it, we've entered a narrow channel where you can't turn around, you can only go forward. And it's a long road, and we don't want it. we used to joke. I entered, I moved into the ashram of Ananda, the Ananda community, in 1971, just before I turned 24. And I've never left, really. I've lived in several places, but I've still just been, I've been living in an ashram, in essence, all that time. Our ashrams look different because we're a community and we have families, and it's just a whole different energy, but it's an ashram, believe me. And I remember after being there 5 or 6 years, and I was living then in with a group of women renunciates. We were all very close friends, almost all the same age. And 5 or 6 years, I had I had this idea in my mind when I first started on the spiritual path. I read something in Yogananda's writing where he said, we carry within us a portable paradise. That we could meditate, we could have these divine experiences. And I don't know why, but I decided that it would take 5 years before that I had total access to the portable paradise. Like, why did I think that? I have no idea, but it was in my mind. So I just thought, piece of cake. Everything, if you're school smart, you just get a very false idea of who you are. So I just thought, well, I'll just be able to do this. 5 years later, I had a whole different perspective on how long this narrow channel was that I'd entered. And I remember talking to the other women, and this was our picture, that we saw the beautiful island over there. We all just leapt off the shore and started swimming like crazy. And as often happens, that island turned out to be a little farther away than we thought. And so we looked back, though, and we've been so vigorous that we're pretty far from shore. So it's not like we can just go back that way. We look that way, and the island is still far away. So we're treading water, chatting with each other about what our options are at this point. And it was a humorous way of saying it, but it was real. It's like we had no idea what self-transformation really entailed. But we were way too far into it to be able to persuade ourselves that we could abandon the effort at this point, because we had moved. We had moved from the false idea that there was an alternative. And yet, once we really got into this project, it was a much bigger project than we knew. Now, we tread water for a while, and then we just started swimming, but started swimming more intelligently, with a little more awareness of what this really is that we're doing. So when I have to talk about these extremely big subjects, the enthusiasm for them is not because this is easy. The enthusiasm for it is because what choice do we have? So when you begin to understand, even if we're still lingering in Vaishya and Shudras, when we begin to understand that Kshatriya is the only way, that I've entered into this battlefield. Weirdly, recently, I've read a lot of historical fiction about war and about battle. I've never had any inclination, but I've read a lot of different books about men in battle, really. Jeff Shara has written some really interesting books about the Civil War and American wars, if you read for relaxation like I do. But I really have gotten a feeling of what happens when a soldier is on the field like that, and there's really nothing you can do. It doesn't matter that you don't like it. It doesn't matter that you'd rather be home with your family. It doesn't matter that conditions are horrible. You're here, and that's what you have to do. Now, I don't say that to make everyone feel terrible. I say that because let's not waste any energy wishing things were different than they are. Reality always wins. And what we eventually get from deep and sincere spiritual study, from meditation, from inner experiences, or just the experience of, every time we go through some of this music, I hope you all feel it like I feel it. Of course, I've been listening to this music for decades, but somehow every time I hear these songs, the vibration moves you somewhere. And it just moves you somewhere else. And from that perspective, everything looks a little different. And so we have that from chanting, from singing, from meditation, from being out in nature, from profound and desperate prayer. Do not ever underestimate the power of desperate prayer. The more desperate, sometimes the better, like my friend from Sweden. We have what I call the Piglet prayer, the Winnie the Pooh stories. Piglet is the little pig who wears the striped shirt, and Piglet is a little bit adventurous, but has, kind of a lot of weaknesses. And Piglet and Pooh went out on an adventure, and they went out into the forest, and then the fog descended, and then they were lost. They were just lost in the forest. And Pooh, the character, is trying to be calm, and Piglet is panicked. And Piglet, in the little drawing, puts his head down on his arm, just in total despair like this. Then Piglet gathers everything he has left, and he lifts his head up and he shouts, "Help, help, help!" like that, and then he collapses again like that. Now, of course, in the story, it turns out that they're quite near their own home. They don't even know it. And when Piglet calls help, help, friends hear and they come and rescue them. But the part of it that has always been so powerful to me is what I have called the Piglet prayer, which is even when it looks like there's no hope and you're collapsed, just lift your chin up long enough to say, "Help, help, help," before you go down again. And someone is listening. Someone is always listening, and will get you through it. But if we waste energy wanting it to be different than it is, so it's very interesting to examine ourselves when we're suffering, which is how much of that suffering is just wishing it was different than it is. And how much, therefore, of energy that could go to some solution is just going in a circle, wishing it could be different. I was talking about that. I was caught in that. I was having conversations with people who were not asking my opinion to explain to them how they ought to behave. Vaishya to the core. Oh, if you were different, my life would be better. Yeah, how much energy are we spending? So if we want to awaken our inner power, we have to be efficient. And then we need to understand that we are profoundly and deeply loved by God, which is a hard one to get, isn't it? Especially when He's not really cooperating with what we think should happen. And this is one of the things that Master brought into the world that's very important. And that is the right understanding of Divine Mother, the right understanding of the feminine. And I'm in a female body, and people expect me sometimes to stand up for the woman. I don't that much. I'm not against women. I've been one for quite a long time, and it's quite comfortable. But men and women are not the issue. It's not women dominating men or men dominating women. Believe me, I understand a lot has been done that shouldn't have been done. So I'm not denigrating anybody's suffering or abuse or trauma. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm moving it to a different level. Feminine and masculine are realities. They're divine realities. There's such a thing as that, which I use the word yin and yang because it has no social context. Yin and yang is the Chinese symbol. It's a perfect circle, divided perfectly in half. One half is yin, one half is yang. Yin is the receptive side. Yang is the outward moving side. Everything in life is a balance of yin and yang, and it has to be in balance. If it's out of balance, very terrible things happen, period. That's just the way it is. And we've been very yang. Many of our cultures have been very yang, and very terrible things have happened. It has to come to balance. But Divine Mother is something quite different than any of gender politics. It's not what it's about. It's that there is a feminine energy which is part of the infinite consciousness. And Jesus actually talked about it. At the time of Jesus, he could only progress the society he was in at that time, and he came to help against the corrupt priesthood in the temples there. And the corrupt priesthood had created this image of God as a very harsh judge with hundreds of rules. And you had to follow all of those rules, or else the judge would judge you very harshly and you'd be out. You'd be finished. And that was a complete corruption. So Jesus took it from the judge to the Father. And he said, if you ask of your Father a loaf of bread, will he give you a stone? And then the story of the prodigal son who goes away and squanders his inheritance, but as soon as he comes back, his father welcomes him with open arms. You are my son. That's how he could do it. But he couldn't really bring it all the way to the mother because it was just too big a leap for the society he was in. The masters all have exactly the same teaching, but once they enter an incarnation, they are limited by the culture that they have come to serve, by the receptivity of the culture they're serving, by the needs of their disciples. And so Jesus came to that particular culture, which happened to be Judaism. It didn't turn into Christianity until later, but it was Judaism he was serving, and that was the problem the Jewish people, because of the priesthood, were facing. Okay? But Jesus said, he said, after I am gone, I will send you the Comforter. Isn't that a wonderful word? I will send you the Comforter. And the Comforter will do things for you that I wasn't able to do. And esoterically, when you begin to understand that the Comforter was the mother, that's who he was going to send. Because the mother is the Comforter. And then Yogananda came because now we're very comfortable with the Father, but the Father has gone a little too far. So now we need to get the yin-yang balance back, so now we have the Divine Mother. And Yogananda, at one of the recordings of him in his Bengali accent, he says, pray to God as the mother, he can't resist you when you do, which is such a delightful scramble of all of the gender and the pronouns. But that's what he meant, is that there's this divine force beyond creation, which is what the masculine is. There's the divine force within creation, which is what the mother is. And we deeply need to understand that the divine is with us in the way that a mother is with us. And if one has had an ideal mother or can even imagine it, you know what that means. Sometimes I've shared with you a story when I was 7 years old, and I went to sleepaway camp. And I was the littlest kid in the camp, and we had to make these pot holders that you wove, and I just was too small. I couldn't do it. And everybody else in camp had pot holders, and then Parents' Day came, and people had the little nails on their bunks, and they hung their pot holders up, and I had none because I was too small to do them. And I took a couple from a bunk above me, and I put them on my bunk. You know, in a 7-year-old mind, like, I'm going to get away with this. She's like right above me. It's my friend even. And so there they are, like that. And then the girl, I think her name was Rainey, as it happens, she was there, and she got very upset because they were hers. By this time, my parents are on the scene. Now, I was raised in an extremely ethical family, and we never lied. You know, you could do anything, but you always had to tell the truth, but not in this moment. So she's claiming that I've taken her pot holders, and I remember with, 7-year-old tears, sobbing, saying to my mother, they fell. They fell. Like little children are so transparent. They fell. I just couldn't admit it at that point. This is such a poignant memory in my life. It brings tears to my eyes, literally. I just remember that my mother just held me like that. I was a little kid. I mean, I was young and I was small, and she just held me, and I just remember weeping on her shoulder. They fell, they fell. Of course, everybody but me knew, of course, they didn't fall. You just took them. And what's interesting to me is that somewhere there must have been a point of reckoning, because I know my parents. There must have been a point when we had to come to terms with the fact that I'd taken them. But I don't remember any of that. I mean, partly because my parents were very good, and so it wouldn't have been, they would have done it well. But what I remember is the way my mother held me and how heartbroken I was. That's what we're talking about. If one human mother can know how perfectly what was in my heart, you know? It's just like, how glorious is that? And when we really begin to understand that this is an inner battle and I can't control this world, we need to have friends in high places. And we have to make it a matter of first priority to cultivate these experiences. That's what the whole spiritual path is: meditation, chanting, prayer, satsang, company of other truth seekers, finding friends and people you can trust who can help you, living your life however your karma allows, that gives you the opportunity and the space. And with the internet these days, you can keep the company of some of the greatest saints that ever lived. You can listen to Anandamoyi Ma chanting. You can see wonderful pictures of Sri Ramakrishna. Krishna is all over. Paramahansa Yogananda, Babaji, Jesus Christ. I mean, you can, Swami Kriyananda, you can keep the company of great souls. Their voices, their music, their presence with us. We need to make friends. On a very deep level, we have to make friends with those who live on a higher dimension. And anything else that we do to try to protect ourselves from negativity or to awaken our inner power will be very transitory. But when we can make this relationship, I've read a number of books about Christian missionaries. I was raised in a Jewish family, so even though that lifestyle rather appealed to me in certain ways, I couldn't imagine, I mean, how could I? I just couldn't do it. But and their theology is not necessarily anything I would subscribe to. But my goodness, they have a lot of power in their faith. Just extraordinary power in their faith. And miracles happen because of that power, because Jesus is a living presence. He's here with us. So we really have to do whatever we need to do, which is, in my case, has been to read a lot about people who have faith, read stories of saints and yogis and missionaries and just anyone who has really lived for God, and to take into your life so that that understanding will begin to sink deeper and deeper into us. So that when we find ourselves treading water, we've gone too far out to go back and we can't go forward, or the world has just picked us up and put us somewhere that we never wanted to be, and there's no apparent exit from it, which it could happen. You could be living in a $1 million home somewhere in Silicon Valley and you still find yourself someplace you never expected to be, with obligations you can't escape. It's not about your external circumstances. Does my happiness come from controlling the world, or does it come from being the master of my own inner energy and being able to do what I need to do with positive divine grace, with courage? And then you move from being a kshatriya to being a Brahmin, which is when it comes that you really can say everything happens by the will of God. Not merely that it's an affirmation, but you actually know that everything happens from the will of God. So why am I resisting? Oh, I have lots of reasons why I'm resisting. I don't like this. I'm afraid of that. The people I love are being hurt. I feel responsible. I mean, you can go like that. But would this be happening outside the will of God? I was very emotionally upset about the suffering of someone else at a certain point. I was at the hospital, and I went out into the parking lot. The parking lot of the hospital must have seen a lot of tears. Sitting in the car, I just sobbing my heart out because people are suffering, and I can't do anything. I can't do anything. This voice came in my right ear, rattled through my brain, and I feel like it came out my left ear. I felt like it just went right through. It said, could this be happening outside the will of God? Now, I'd done decades of work before that happened, just practicing when it was easier. Every situation that I rebelled against, could this be happening outside the will of God? So when that question came, I thought, no, of course not. I can't imagine why this is happening, but God, Divine Mother, loves me and loves us all. And she's comforting us. She has a plan. And then, of course, the next question was, then why are you crying? And I actually had a very good reason for crying. My crying was, because I'm worn out and I can't deal with this anymore. And so you need to fix it. So then I talked to Divine Mother like you can talk. You need to fix this because I can't deal with it. Just like that. I can't deal with it. This is honest. You know, you might have a plan, but I'm at the end. You have to save me. And then I came up with a prayer that I highly recommend for a situation when your grief is because others are suffering. Whatever it is, Divine Mother, that you're trying to teach them, help them to learn it. Help give them wisdom, receptivity, devotion, help them to learn it. And then I often add, and make it soon. Yeah, because we don't have it anymore to be able to deal with this. In that situation, that was nearly a miracle. I went back into the hospital, the whole energy had shifted. And from that on, I mean, was it just for me? Were we all intertwined? Was the karma all the same? I don't know. It taught me what it was supposed to teach me, and then all of a sudden it wasn't. Now, that doesn't always happen. But once you've given it over to Divine Mother, why am I still gripping it? Why am I, see, resistance. Okay? The question was raised that even though one is living in a particular gender body, in this case female, the question, one has also a great deal of masculine energy within one and often comes across in ways that is not so much welcome because you're not behaving the way you're supposed to behave. The soul has no gender. Gender is entirely a factor of the material body that you're in. And in the end, so to speak, when we finally actually accomplish what we're supposed to be accomplishing, we become whole, complete within ourselves. This is why, but we become complete within ourselves. And the whole yin-yang reality is we have to make the full circle ourselves. We tend to start in a particular body because it's suitable for the lessons that we have to learn, but it's not that we're supposed to be more this or more that. We're supposed to be appropriate in all circumstances to what is going to be most helpful in those circumstances. And we're here to serve, is what we have to understand. And our happiness comes in the degree that we can serve. That's where our happiness comes, not from falsely suppressing yourself when it's not appropriate to do so, but it's from understanding that we are part of all that is, that every sentient being is our brother and sister, and compassion and love. We need to become Divine Mother herself. And the ideal mother disciplines appropriately, comforts appropriately, and that's what we're trying to become. It's neither male nor female. It's neither masculine nor feminine. It is what will be helpful in the moment. And the degree to which we have full access to all human potential, it gives us the opportunity to be the most helpful. But if we are compelled to do what I usually do because of the way I am, then we're not going to be as helpful as if we're able to be centered in ourselves and can impersonally ask what's going to be the most helpful. I had a very interesting experience when I was 18. I happened to spend 19. I spent the summer in New York City. And I had to learn at that time to stand up for myself on a level that I wasn't accustomed to doing. And because people in New York are much more brash and outspoken than they are in California, it was a great place to learn, because I could just be much more aggressive, and nobody thought of it as aggressive. So I just learned to speak my mind in a way that I needed to do, whether it was nice or not. Many years later, in 1976, I'm working at Ananda Village. We're in charge of publishing Swami's autobiography, which is now called the New Path. It was just the Path then. It was the group of the same women that I lived with. It was our job. He'd gone to India. We had to publish the book while he was away. And there was this one woman in that group, a great friend of mine, who did not have my issue about not speaking her mind. She was very, very, very good at speaking her mind. And she was a key person in the whole thing. And she got in a really bad mood. And she started getting really aggressive. And I was in charge of the team, and I looked at her, and I knew her well, and I said, she needs to fight with somebody. And I just walked over, and she yelled at me, I yelled at her, she yelled louder, I yelled back, we just went right in the middle of, Ananda. Everybody's just horrified, but I just followed her to the top. We got to the top, and then we came down. And it was just fine, because I knew her. She was just explosive, and once it was done, it was done. That was interesting in itself. I thought to myself later, good for me, because I had access to that energy, and in the moment, I was able to access it and use it. And if I had not done the work earlier to have access to that energy, I wouldn't have been able to help her. So we have to think, not male, female, gender this, gender that, just what's appropriate. Some situations are solved by a very, what we would call the way, man's response. Some situations are solved by a female response. You just have to ask what's helpful here. And then we have to train ourselves, this is the whole thing, to be able to do what's helpful, not just to do how I define myself. But this is how you also unlock your inner power, is to not just say, well, I can't do that, I can't do this, this is what I have to do. No, what's helpful here? Is that easy? No. Is it worth developing? Yes. That's the soldier, you see, that's the kshatriya. What's required here? Okay?
I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help. My help cometh from the Lord, who made the heavens and the earth. He will not suffer thy foot to be moved. He that keepeth thee will not slumber. Behold, he that keepeth Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is thy keeper. The Lord is thy shade upon thy right hand. The sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord shall preserve thee from all evil. He shall preserve thy soul. The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth, and even forevermore. mist, through snows, through turbulent tide. The touch of your hand is my strength and my guide. I ask for no riches that death can destroy. I crave only thee, your love and your joy. I ask for no riches that death can destroy. I crave only thee, your love and your joy. The dancers will pass, the singing must end. I welcome the darkness with you for my friend. And then Asha, what is this last one you have in mind? Great. Make us channels of thy peace. This is based on a prayer by St. Francis. So make us channels is 169. Lord Most High, our Heavenly Father, all our lives we dedicate to Thee. All our labors, all our joys and woes, all our pleasure, all our melody. Make us each a channel of thy peace. When in darkness, guide us from above. Where there's sorrow, may we sow thy joy. Where there's hatred, may we share thy love. And once more. Lord Most High, our Heavenly Father, all our lives we dedicate to Thee. All our labors, all our joys and woes, all our pleasure, all our melody. Make us each a channel of thy peace. When in darkness, guide us from above. Where there's sorrow, may we sow thy joy. Where there's hatred, may we share thy love.
Dream?
Life is a Dream on page 152. Same key. Life is a dream, time like a stream carries our burdens away. Never despair, joys everywhere. Love can befriend you today. Free from all care, like birds on the air, soar above griefs and worries, seek joy and be gay. Often on earth, things of great worth, worldly ambitions defy. sometimes a friend, helps us ascend up from life's cares to the sky. Love is a star, though shining afar. It can guide us and help us toward light to draw nigh. Love is a star, though shining afar. It can guide us and help us toward light to draw nigh. 'Nightingale, nightingale, sing of joy through the night. Teach my heart to impart everywhere your delight. Sing of moon rays on the rain, sing that love's not in vain. Every grief, every wrong has its ending in song. Nightingale, nightingale, sing of joy through the night. Teach all men how to spin clouds of gloom into light. Without silence, what is song? Without night, where is dawn? Were it not for man's woes, who would smile at a rose? Nightingale, nightingale, sing of joy through the night. Let each tone silence groan, earth and heaven unite. Morning laughter, evening tears, snow and blossoms all fade. Joy must sing in the night to face change unafraid. Nightingale, nightingale,